IntecGaming sent me a Game Boy Advance player. Let's see if it's any good. IntecGaming has developed a Game Boy player which uses the original motherboard from a Game Boy Advance and turns the empty shell into a controller. It also has Bluetooth connectability, which allows you to use a Switch controller, an Xbox controller, or a PS4 or PS5 controller. Now, this isn't a new concept. We've been able to play Game Boy games on the TV since the Super Nintendo with the Super Game Boy. However, Game Boy Advance games, we've been able to do that since the GameCube. That being said, the GameCube readers are getting pretty expensive and those discs are getting pretty hard to find. Now, you can also use a Retron 5. They're $150 if I'm not mistaken. And you can also get an HDMI mod for your Game Boy Advance, which you literally just hook up a mini HDMI to and it goes right to your TV. However, they can be a little expensive, and if you don't have any soldering skill, then you're going to have to pay someone to do it for you, and that, again, adds on to the price. That being said, I never actually installed one, so maybe there isn't soldering, but anyhow, let's unbox this thing. The packaging is nice and it's pretty clean. Now, there is a manual that would be on top here, however, earlier I got a little excited and removed it to read it. Inside your packaging, you'll find the actual player here. I believe there's two colors, blue and orange. Under that, we have the Game Boy Advance shell, which has been made into a controller. Inside this little box here, we also have a power cord, we have an HDMI cord, and we also have AV RCA hookups if you wanted to go that route instead. The player itself is very small and lightweight, which is great because you can practically fit that anywhere. Or if you collect consoles and you're running out of room like myself, it's perfect, I'll find somewhere for it. The Game Boy Advance controller has a Super Nintendo hookup, which means that if you don't like this controller, you can just switch it out for a Super Nintendo one. Or you could play Super Nintendo with this controller instead. Not saying you should, but you could. If we look at the back of the system here, we can see that it's USB-C power and it has a full-size HDMI port. As I mentioned earlier, it includes its own power cord, which is just USB-C to USB-A, which is great because then you can power it off anything that has a USB-C port, such as like a standard brick, a laptop, a system. Here in my workstation, my power block has USB, so I'm just going to plug it into that. The system comes with its own HDMI cord. However, again, here in my workstation, I already have one handy, so I'm just going to plug it into that instead. If you don't want to use HDMI, the package also includes AV. And that's all it takes to set this thing up. Now we just need to put it in a game and power it on. On the back, we have two picture modes, 16:9 and 4:3, which you could switch in between to see which picture you like. Personally, I think the smaller image is more crisp, so I'm going to go with that. And just like that, we're playing a Game Boy Advance game on our TV with HDMI. However, I'm going to give this thing a true Game Boy test with a true Game Boy testing game. Tetris is a great Game Boy testing game because it has quick audio and you can quickly get into gameplay to test all of your buttons. And I quickly found a problem. Pushing down would also sometimes give me a right button input. Now, I didn't know if this was the controller or the system, so conveniently because of that Super Nintendo hookup, I was able to use a different controller, and if you're a cool kid like myself, you have a wireless Super Nintendo one, which was dead, so I had to plug it in, so it is wired. And that rectified the problem, so it was just a controller issue. Now, I also could have gone the Bluetooth method and used a PS4 controller, however, this way was just a little easier. A worry I had was input lag, however, it seems to work fine. When I slowed it down, it's there, but minimal. I do have a Game Boy testing cart, which is really only supposed to be used for DMG Game Boys, however, I figured I'd give it a go, and this seemed to work fine. However, on the scroll test, there was a little bit of a pause. Now, if I'm not mistaken, there's going to be two different versions launched. One that's going to include the Game Boy Advance motherboard, and one that doesn't. Which means that you're going to either have to already have a Game Boy Advance, or you're going to have to go out and purchase one. However, buying new ones, they're getting pretty expensive nowadays. They're about $100 Canadian or so. So that might not be the best idea when going this route. It might just be best to buy the whole completed thing. I don't know what their prices are just yet, as it's only a Kickstarter. They might be listed somewhere. Haven't looked that far into it. So with that, we're going to disassemble it and show how to reassemble it. Now, I'm not going to use my tools. I'm going to use the tools that were provided in the kit. The kit has a tri-head and a Phillips head screwdriver, and this might just be a little nitpicky, but I wish they'd color code them because I kept mixing them up while I was doing this. To open the shell, you'll need to remove 4 Phillips head screws, which are underneath the foot pads. With those out, we're able to open the shell. Now, if you have the do-it-yourself kit, you're obviously not going to have a Game Boy Advance motherboard already in here, but the one here is an original board, so that's nice. It uses the same screw holes that are found in the Game Boy Advance itself, so just remove those 3 Phillips head screws and it will pop out. And don't forget to unlatch the ribbon cable. There's nothing too crazy on the board, however, I found these compressible pegs pretty neat. On the back side, there's 2 different sizes of ribbon connectors depending on the Game Boy Advance version that you have. Now, just for fun, I wanted to see if this thing was still fully operational, so I put on a screen, put in a game, and put on some external power, and lo and behold, it worked, but it didn't have audio. We'll cover that in a second. If you have the DIY kit, you'll have to disassemble your Game Boy Advance. It has 6 tri-head screws and 1 Phillips screw behind the battery cover. Now you may have noted that this is the controller they sent, but disassembling it is the exact same thing, they just use Phillips head screws all around. The board you see here is the controller board, which will replace your Game Boy motherboard. Once the Game Boy motherboard's out, you can just drop in the controller board. You don't have to remove anything else, including the screen. I wonder if this would still work if I just plugged it in. I'm not a big fan of the controller, especially because this shell is a cheap third-party one and I was having issues with it. With those issues, I'm going to try to clean the pads here just to see if that rectifies anything and then reassemble it. If you have the DIY kit, once the motherboard's out, you're going to put in the controller board and then use the original 3 screws to secure it in. The wire conveniently feeds through the extension port hole, so no trimming involved. You'll need to replace the 7 screws and then your controller is ready to go. In your included parts, there's 2 different sizes of ribbon cables, the 40 pin and 32 pin. Do a quick fitment test with the Game Boy's motherboard, don't actually install it yet, just figure out what cable you need. Once you've discovered which size you need, install it into the appropriate ribbon cable connector on the board, pins down, or black side up, whichever you like. Hold onto the controller port and reinsert the board into the shell, and then secure it using the provided screws. Next, we're going to use the rubber eraser that's included with your kit. Rubbing the eraser on the gold conductive pads will clean them. This is a super common practice and is commonly used on games. That's why I keep an eraser on my bench. With those pads nice and clean, we're going to insert the motherboard into the system. Connect the ribbon cable and then put screws in the 3 original screw holes to secure it into the system. With all the internals secured, we're going to put the shell back together using the 4 original Phillips head screws. And now your system will be ready to play. So what is my overall review? I like it. What's not to like? It does exactly as it's advertised to do. It plays Game Boy Advance games via HDMI. Now you can also do RCA, which is a nice feature. It has USB-C power, which is super convenient because that's literally everywhere. I like the fact that you can change the picture between original and then wider. I prefer the smaller screen because it looks a little more crisp to me. And I like the fact that they're using the original hardware, which is super efficient and it's going to be cost effective in the long run. And then it kind of cuts down on waste as well. So yeah, that's what I think of it. So now that I've looked at this thing, I went out and I watched some other reviews just to kind of see what everybody else is saying and see if I missed anything. Now, Macho Nacho did a really good review. I highly recommend you go check that out. I was incorrect earlier when I said that the original picture and the wider picture. Apparently, neither of them are the original picture. One's a little more compressed and one's a little wider, so that's a bit of a downside. And then Retro RGB did a lag test using some of his equipment, and he found that there's extreme lag to it. I didn't notice that as much just with my general game playing, but he was really able to get down to the minutiae of that. With that being said, my opinion hasn't changed at all. I still enjoyed it. Now, this isn't actually available just yet. It's a Kickstarter, so I'm going to link that in my bio if you want to go check out and support it. But other than that, let's save the consoles and have a great night.